On the morning of October 29th, 312, the air over Rome was thick. Thick with tension, the smell of mud, the smell of battle. A Roman soldier, Constantine, just 40 years old, walks through the gates of the city at the front of his army.
And this is the culmination of a 6-year struggle. He's finally beaten the sitting emperor Maxentius in this desperate fight at the Milvian Bridge.
But this victory, it wasn't just another military power grab. I mean, Rome had seen plenty of those. This was the moment that Constantine introduced a powerful and, frankly, world-changing new symbol.
It's the birth of what we could call the Consecrated Empire. That day, October 29, 312, it really is a fault line in history. Before that day, Rome was, well, it was Rome. After that day, it starts its transformation into something completely new.
And that's what we're here for. We are diving deep into that 18-year period that followed when Constantine imposes his will on this vast, fracturing Roman world. He doesn't just take the crown.
No, not at all. He strategically dismantles the entire old political structure. He eliminates every single possible rival, and maybe most importantly, he decisively shapes the doctrine of the Christian church itself to serve his imperial ambition.
So our mission today is to really get a rapid understanding of the sheer political and military ruthlessness this all required. We're going to unpack the grisly details of his rise, the complex politics of getting rid of his co-emperors.
Because Constantine was never a man for sharing power.
Not at all. And we'll look at the strategic, and let's be clear, the non-theological reasons he adopted Christianity and the earth-shaking outcome of the Council of Nicaea in 325 CE.
Because what Constantine did after the Battle of the Milvian Bridge, it was pure political theater mixed with absolute unyielding brutality.
Okay, let's unpack this.
The Battle of the Milvian Bridge itself, it was a real nail-biter. It happens just north of Rome, and it's the climax of this long 6-year struggle for control of the Western Roman Empire.
You've got Constantine, who's 40. He's the older, more experienced general, and he's up against the 29-year-old Maxentius.
And Maxentius's forces are decisively defeated. They're forced to retreat back towards Rome in a complete panic.
And that retreat just becomes a total catastrophe. Maxentius had set up this pontoon bridge to get his army across the Tiber River. It was a temporary thing, designed to collapse if it had to be abandoned.
But the whole retreat just turns into a rout. The bridge gives way too early under the weight of all these fleeing troops, and critically, Maxentius himself goes into the river.
Right. And he's wearing full imperial armor.
He had no chance. The sheer weight of it just pulled him straight down into the mud of the riverbed. It's a really gruesome and pretty ignominious end for a reigning emperor.
And Constantine knows he needs proof. It's not enough to say he drowned. He needs the body.
He absolutely needs the body, so they have to dredge the Tiber for it. And what he does next, this is where we get the start of his propaganda strategy.
It's this tale of two accounts, isn't it? A perfect juxtaposition of this new holy symbolism and the raw brutality you needed to hold power.
Exactly. On one side, you have the Christian historian Lactantius. He gives us the iconic version, the one we all sort of know. Constantine's men march into Rome with the sign of Christ, the heroes marked on every shield.
And that's not just a battle marking. That frames the entire victory as divine favor. It elevates Constantine from just another general to, well, God's chosen instrument.
But then you have the Roman writer, Zosimus, and Zosimus, who is definitely not pro-Christian. He adds the crucial visceral detail.
The head.
The head. After they dredge Maxentius's body from the river, Constantine has him publicly decapitated, and his men carry Maxentius's waterlogged head on the tip of a spear as they march into Rome.
Think about that for a second, that fusion of imagery. You have this new sacred symbol of salvation on the shields, marching right next to the terrifying, dripping head of the defeated enemy.
It's a message, a brutally effective one. It tells the people of Rome two things at once. My God is stronger than your emperor, and my methods are more ruthless than you can imagine.
So he gets to the imperial palace. He's not there to celebrate. He's there for immediate surgical political consolidation.
And the sources say he acted decisively but judiciously. That's a key word. He doesn't just start a mass slaughter of anyone who supported Maxentius.
No, that would create too many martyrs, too much chaos. He's smarter than that.
He's much smarter. He orders the executions of only the nearest friends of the fallen emperor, the top layer, the financiers, the chief administrators, the military commanders who were personally loyal.
He decapitates the opposition's leadership, basically, but he leaves the rest of the bureaucracy, the Senate, the people he actually needs to run the empire intact.
And then he makes a move that signals a complete break with the past. He dissolves the Praetorian Guard.
Wow. I mean, for centuries, the Praetorians were the kingmakers of Rome. They were powerful, arrogant, and often the source of all the instability.
They were. And they had supported Maxentius's usurpation of power, which sealed their fate. By dissolving the Guard, Constantine eliminates this historical source of instability and ensures that from now on, the emperor's bodyguards owe their loyalty only to him.
It's a huge political
A
statement.
profound one. But the power message, as you said, it didn't just stop at the gates of Rome. Maxentius had huge support in North Africa.
Which was the breadbasket of Rome. Absolutely vital.
Vital. So Constantine has Maxentius's head carefully packaged up and shipped south across the Mediterranean.
That is the ultimate nonverbal communication, isn't it? Imagine you're a governor in Carthage, loyal to Maxentius, and you open that box.
The message is crystal clear. Switch your allegiance to me now, or this is what happens to you. That combination of victory, a surgical purge, and just terrifying symbolism, it set the stage for everything that came next. He was master of the West, but he was far from being master of the world.
So Constantine has the West, but the Roman Empire is still officially run by Diocletian's system, the Tetrarchy, this idea of co-rulers.
An ingenious system, in theory. 2 senior emperors, the Augusti, and 2 junior ones, the Caesars. It was designed to prevent any one man from getting too powerful.
But the fatal flaw was succession. It just created multiple competing lines, which led to constant civil war.
And Constantine, having just survived that very meat grinder, had absolutely no intention of sharing power. His vision was singular rule.
So who is left on the board?
There were 2 major players remaining. You had Licinius, a military veteran who controlled the central part of the empire, and Maximinus Daia, who ruled the crucial eastern territories. And Daia was constantly dealing with the threat of the Persian Empire on his border.
Okay, so Constantine is too smart to fight a war on 2 fronts. He has to pick one to ally with, at least for a while.
And he makes a calculated choice. He allies with the less powerful of the 2, Licinius. To seal the deal, Constantine offers his 18-year-old half-sister, Constantia, in marriage.
This isn't a love match. This is pure politics.
Pure, unadulterated political leveraging. It binds Licinius to him with a family tie he can't easily break. And Licinius desperately needed the alliance.
So what's his act of good faith?
He immediately pivots and goes to fight Maximinus Daia. This happens in April of 313, just 6 months after Constantine took Rome. And on paper, it looks like suicide. Daia has 70,000 men,
And Licinius.
fewer than 30,000. He should have been crushed.
But the fight gets reframed, doesn't it? This isn't just about territory anymore.
No, and this is another piece of Constantine's political genius being used by proxy. Maximinus Daia was a die-hard pagan. He had publicly vowed to wipe out Christianity in the name of Jupiter. He was leading violent persecutions.
So Licinius, seeing what worked for Constantine at the Milvian Bridge.
He does the exact same thing.
Yeah.
He has his small army march under the Christian banner. This territorial skirmish in the Balkans is suddenly elevated into a holy war.
It's brilliant psychological warfare. It positions the Christian god as the one who dispenses military victory.
And it works. Licinius' smaller, ideologically fired-up army completely routs Daia's massive force at a place called Campus Serenus.
So Daia flees.
He flees in disguise, terrified. But Licinius pursues him relentlessly and traps him in the city of Tarsus. Seeing no way out, Daia swallows poison.
But the story of his death becomes, well, it becomes the most visceral piece of religious propaganda of the era.
Oh, it's incredible. And Lactantius, our Christian historian, seizes on it and documents every agonizing detail. Apparently, Daia ate a huge last meal, which for some reason delayed the praesens effect.
So he doesn't just die.
He takes 4 excruciating days to die. A slow public spectacle of what is framed as divine retribution.
And Lactantius gives us the detail.
The shocking details. He says the poison caused Daia to dash his forehead against the wall, that his eyes started out of their sockets. But the key part, the politically significant part, is the vision.
Right. In his delirium, he sees something.
He becomes blind, and he imagines he sees God with his servants arrayed in white robes sitting in judgment on him. He dies, quote, in groans like those of one burned alive.
Their message to any pagan opponent across the empire could not be clearer.
Not just our army will defeat you. Our God will personally torture you to death in the most spectacular way imaginable. It's terrifyingly effective propaganda.
But the divine narrative aside, the human business of consolidating power was just as brutal.
Absolutely. Licinius then proves he's just as ruthless as Constantine. He murders Maximinus Daia's 2 young children, both under 9 years old, and their mother. And then he kills 3 other potential child claimants to the Eastern throne.
And what does Constantine do about his new brother-in-law murdering a bunch of children?
The source material is very clear. It says Constantine found it prudent to ignore this bloodshed.
Of course he did. It served his purpose perfectly. Licinius cleared the field in the east, removing any future threats, and Constantine got to keep his hands technically clean.
They were now the undisputed masters of the Roman world. Two of them, for now.
So with the board cleared, the two of them meet in Milan.
They meet in Mediolanum, modern Milan, to celebrate the wedding and to issue an empire-wide proclamation that makes Christianity legal. It was essential. They'd both just won major victories under the Christian banner.
And this is the famous Edict of Milan from 313.
Right. And while Christians had been tolerated here and there before, this was the first definitive empire-wide legal protection.
What's the key language?
The key provision states, no one whatsoever should be denied the opportunity to give his heart to the observance of the Christian religion. It allowed Christians to practice freely and openly without molestation.
That's a monumental shift. But it's important to understand the context here. This wasn't making Christianity the state religion.
Not even close. That comes much, much later. The edict was fundamentally a declaration of religious liberty aimed at creating stability. It explicitly guaranteed the same freedom for other religions.
So it's a peace treaty, not a conversion document.
Exactly. It was about keeping the peace. It also mandated that all confiscated Christian property had to be returned. This was revolutionary. It turned these small communities into legally recognized entities that could own property, which gave them real economic and political power.
And the edict itself explains the reason for all this, doesn't it?
It does. The conclusion basically says that by doing this, the divine favor, which we have already experienced, may for all time preserve and prosper our successes together with the good of the state.
So it's all about the good of the state. God, or the gods, were just partners in the imperial project.
Precisely. It was a purely political calculation.
Okay, so by 313, Constantine and Licinius have used the Christian banner to get rid of everyone else. But the empire itself is still facing this massive internal threat that you just can't fix with an army.
Right. And this is where we see Constantine's real political genius. He understands that the traditional Roman identity is failing. The empire is being pulled apart by these intense centrifugal forces.
What do you mean by that?
Well, the provinces had their own deep, older identities that were much stronger than their Roman identity. Think about a city like Tarsus. Yes, it was a Roman administrative center, but culturally, people spoke Greek, and their traditions were fundamentally Asian.
Or Carthage in North Africa. Roman on paper, but deeply African in its culture and roots.
Exactly. Or Gaul, which was full of Germanic tribes with their own languages, their own gods. The old system of military power and roads held it all together, but that cultural pull, the other, was getting stronger and stronger. It was becoming impossible to be both, say, a loyal Visigoth and a wholeheartedly Roman citizen.
The old loyalty structure was breaking down, so he needs a new one. He needs a new kind of glue.
New kind of glue. And that brings us to the strategic value of the cross. But it's not for the reason most people think. He wasn't trying to win over the existing Christians.
Right, because there weren't that many of them, were there?
Not at all. The historian Vasiliev estimates they were maybe 1/10 of the population, which at that time was taking no part in political affairs. They were a tiny, politically irrelevant minority.
So that seems completely counterintuitive. Why would you risk alienating the 90% of your empire that worships the traditional gods just to appeal to this tiny group?
Because Constantine saw something in Christianity that nobody in power had seen before. He saw it as a new model of universal citizenship that could transcend all those failing local identities.
Ah, okay. So it didn't matter if you were Greek or Latin, slave or free, Syrian or Gaul.
You could all be Christian. The identity was universal and spiritual. It wasn't tied to a specific place, like Jupiter on the Capitoline Hill in Rome. Christianity had no political homeland, which made it the perfect religion for an empire that swallowed homelands for a living.
So if you're a Visigoth in Gaul, Jupiter means nothing to you, but a universal Christ figure that could hold appeal. He's trying to unify a splintering state in the name of a single universal God.
Precisely. And this political interpretation is really backed up by Constantine's own spiritual status at the time. He did not have a sudden dramatic conversion in 312.
Right. He kept putting Sol Invictus, the unconquered sun god, on his coins for another decade at least.
He did, and he remained Pontifex Maximus, the chief priest of the traditional Roman state cult, right up until his death.
Wait, so he's the head pagan priest, but he's also telling everyone to march under the cross? How did he square that circle?
From a political viewpoint, it's not a contradiction. He saw himself as the supreme magistrate, appointed by the supreme deity. Whether you called that deity Sol Invictus or the Christian God didn't really matter to him, as long as it was a singular, unifying spiritual authority.
So he needed the power of the Christian God, but not necessarily personal salvation. He famously wasn't even baptized until he was on his deathbed.
In 336, yes, the political utility of the faith always came first, and that brings us to the final showdown with Licinius in 324.
The alliance had frayed completely by this point. They were just waiting for an excuse.
And Licinius provided the perfect one. He started accusing the Christians in his eastern court of spying for Constantine.
Which, the sources say, they undoubtedly were.
They undoubtedly were. So Licinius throws them out and starts restricting Christian worship. It's a localized persecution.
And Constantine pounces on it.
Immediately, he announces that Licinius is persecuting Christians, which is a direct violation of their agreement, the Edict of Milan. So the war isn't about territory anymore. It's about defending the faith.
It's another holy war.
Another holy war. They meet in a series of battles, and Licinius is thoroughly defeated at Chrysopolis in September of 324.
And this is where his sister, Constantia, comes in again. She pleads for her husband's life.
Then Constantine, maybe to keep up appearances, initially agrees. He spares Licinius and exiles him to Thessalonica.
But that was never going to last, was it?
Not a chance. A loose end like a former co-emperor is far too dangerous. Within months, in 325, Constantine breaks his promise. He has Licinius hanged.
And just to make absolutely sure,
He also executes Licinius' 10-year-old son, his own nephew. This act left no challengers alive. Constantine was now the undisputed sole ruler of the entire Roman world.
so now he's the sole emperor. And his very first action is kind of surprising. It's not a military campaign. It's not a building project. It's a religious summit.
It is. In 325, his first priority is to guarantee the unity of Christian belief. He understands that Christianity is completely useless to him as a unifying force if it just splinters into a dozen warring factions.
A crack in the church would become a crack in the empire.
Instantly. And this forces him to confront this core theological problem that the church had been wrestling with for centuries, the paradox of Jesus. How can he be indivisibly one and also fully divine and fully human?
That sounds less like a religious problem and more like a philosophical logic bomb.
It's incredibly complex. How do you reconcile the eternal, transcendent nature of God the Father with the limited mortal life of Christ the man? It's like trying to fill one glass to the brim with two entire glasses of different liquids. It's intellectually impossible.
And this tension had already caused all sorts of splits and heresies long before Constantine.
Oh, for centuries.
Yeah.
You had groups like the Ebionites, who basically said Christ was just a man, a prophet who was chosen as Messiah. They leaned too hard into the human side.
Okay, so that strips away the unique divinity that made the faith politically useful for Constantine. What about the other side? The ones who said he was purely divine.
That didn't work either. You had the Docetists, who were really influenced by Greek philosophy and the idea that physical matter is impure. They said Christ only appeared to be human. He was a spirit in a human disguise.
A phantom.
A phantom, basically. And then the Gnostics took it even further, saying the divine Christ and the human Jesus were just, temporary partners. The church was stuck between these extremes.
And this all explodes into the Arian crisis.
Right. Arius, a very charismatic priest in Alexandria, comes up with what seems like a very logical solution. He argues that since God the Father is the one uncreated being, the Son must be a created being.
There was a time when he was not.
That was his famous phrase. For Arius, Christ was the first and greatest of all creations, a kind of demiurge. But he did not share the same essential substance as God the Father.
And that created a huge split because it makes the Son inferior to the Father. It introduces a hierarchy into the Godhead.
It does. And when Constantine hears about this massive argument tearing the Eastern Church apart, he's just exasperated. He sends this letter basically pleading with them to stop.
He says something like, "Restore me then my quiet days and untroubled nights," right?
Exactly. He sees it as a petty squabble over meaningless details. He just wants them to sort it out so he can get on with running his unified empire.
But they won't. So Constantine takes this unprecedented step. He summons a council of all the church leaders to settle it once and for all.
He does. He first plans to hold it in Nicomedia. But then something dramatic happens. A massive earthquake hits the city just as the bishops are traveling there.
Buildings collapse, fires break out.
And the bishops all stop. They think it's a sign. God's judgment against what they're doing.
But Constantine's advisors spin it brilliantly.
They do. They convince the bishops that it wasn't God's judgment, it was a demonic attempt to stop them from achieving unity. So Constantine just moves the council to the city of Nicaea, and everyone follows.
And the Council of Nicaea in 325 is just a revolutionary moment. It's the first time an emperor summons a church council on his own authority. He pays for it, he presides over it. This is where the church and the state officially clasped hands.
It is. Which brings us back to that essential question. Why did Constantine, the Pontifex Maximus, care so much about the precise definition of Christ's divinity?
It had to be practical. He's not a
It
theologian.
was entirely practical. His interest was in imperial control. If the church split, if the East went Arian and the West went Trinitarian, his whole political project for a unified empire would crumble.
So he weighs the options and realizes the most powerful bishops are all anti-Arian.
They are. And he also sees that Arianism is cultural and problematic. By making Christ a secondary, created divinity, it creates a kind of pantheon, with God the Father at the top. It looks a bit too much like the old pagan systems he's trying to replace.
So, guided by the emperor's will, the council at Nicaea produces its verdict, the Nicene Creed.
And the creed is designed to slam the door on Arianism permanently. It asserts that Jesus is begotten, not made, being of one substance with the Father.
That phrase, one substance, homoousios in the Greek, that was the killer phrase. No wiggle room.
None at all. The emperor's will prevailed. And in doing so, he fundamentally altered the church's identity. He gave it the imprint of imperial power.
And in return for letting the emperor dictate their core theology, which is a stunning concession, the church got some incredible perks.
Unbelievable advantages. Constantine made Christian priests equal to Roman priests. He exempted them from taxes, from mandatory military service, a huge financial benefit.
And he made it legal for people to leave property to the church in their wills.
Which, in one move, transformed these small communities into massive, landowning, legally protected entities. Christianity became an incredibly wealthy and powerful political constituency, all thanks to the emperor. The state had merged with the faith.
But the unity that was declared at Nicaea, it was paper thin, wasn't
It
it?
was incredibly fragile.
Yeah.
The Arian crisis had been settled by an imperial command, not by everyone actually agreeing. Arianism didn't just go away. It became this strong and really discontented underground current.
And the tension wasn't just out on the frontiers. It was right inside Constantine's own family.
Right, in his own house.
Yeah.
His sister, Constantia, the one whose husband and son he'd just executed, she becomes a public champion of Arian doctrines. She completely rejects the Nicene Creed that her brother had forced on the church.
You have to wonder about her motives. I mean, was it genuine theological belief or was it personal?
How could it not be personal? She was certainly driven by profound bitterness over the executions of Licinius and her 10-year-old son. Embracing the doctrine that her brother had so violently suppressed was probably the only way she could protest his ruthlessness.
So the theological splits are immediately tangled up with family tragedy and political revenge.
Deeply. And while all this is simmering, Constantine is cementing the political reality of his new Christian empire by literally building a new capital city.
In 330, 4 years after Nicaea, he officially dedicates the rebuilt city of Byzantium as his new capital, and he calls it New Rome.
This was a deliberate and decisive break from the past. Old Rome was soaked in pagan tradition. The temples, the Senate, the aristocratic families who hated him. His new capital, Constantinople, was built from the ground up to be a Christian city.
Full of churches, not temples, he's physically moving the heart of the empire away from its pagan roots.
And he needs to make this new city feel old and legitimate, fast. So he basically engages in cultural theft on a massive scale.
He just takes things.
He takes everything. Priceless old monuments, statues from all the great cities of the old empire, Rome, Athens, Alexandria. He just has them shipped to Constantinople and installed in his new squares and buildings.
He's physically demonstrating that New Rome is the heir to the entire classical world.
And he doesn't just move statues, he moves people. He orders Roman men of rank, senators, aristocrats, to pack up their households and titles and move to the new city.
I can't imagine that went over well with the old families in Rome.
It caused immense resentment. They felt their power and prestige were being deliberately destroyed. But for Constantine, it was essential. He was recreating Rome under the shadow of the cross.
And the symbolism was everywhere in the new capital.
Everywhere. Public fountains were decorated with the image of Daniel in the lion's den, the brave man of God standing against the heathen power. The message was not subtle.
And the centerpiece of his own palace.
A picture of Christ's passion, made of gold and jewels embossed on the very center of the palace roof. He was placing the symbol of the persecuted Christ at the absolute apex of imperial power. It was a complete reversal of history.
So by 330, what's the final picture? Constantine has established one empire under one royal family, theoretically unified by one church.
He got the unity he craved, but those foundations were so shaky, old Rome was seething with resentment. The unified church was held together by what one historian called a thin veneer of imperial sanction.
And the doctrinal disputes, like Arianism, were just bubbling away under the surface.
Exactly. And to top it all off, Constantine's own three sons were already eyeing the throne and waiting for him to die, signaling that the imperial peace he had fought so brutally to create might only last as long as he did. Hashtag outro.
So we've seen in this deep dive how the future of the Roman Empire, and really the course of Western civilization, hinged on this series of brutal, highly calculated decisions by one man.
Military necessity at the Milvian Bridge, political expediency in eliminating rivals like Licinius, and the strategic need for ideological unity at Nicaea. Those are the drivers for every one of Constantine's actions.
He correctly diagnosed the problem. The old Roman identity was fracturing, but he saw that the Christian identity, despite all its internal squabbles, was inherently universal.
And he cemented that new reality. He used raw imperial power not just to tolerate the church, but to dictate its core beliefs, enforce its unity, and give it incredible legal and financial power.
The empire needed a new loyalty structure to survive, and Constantine delivered it by marrying the might of the state to the universality of the cross. It was a transaction, power in exchange for loyalty, and it defined the relationship between church and state for the next 1,000 years.
And we've established that this unified church was created, at least in part, as a political tool for imperial survival, forged under the emperor's authority at Nicaea. So the question this really leaves us with is this. Knowing that the church forfeited its independence to define its own beliefs to the emperor, did the church ultimately gain more from the imperial power Constantine gave it, the tax exemptions, the legal status, the state support, than it lost by submitting to the dictates of the imperial crown?
That is something to mull over.